Hey everybody, we're back. We are in my garage today and we're going to be taking a look at this 2005 LJ, nicknamed the Ox Cart. It's a 2005 TJ Unlimited, and I'm going to show you what we got going on with these AC lines. All right, if we look under the hood of this LJ, you'll see these AC lines. They run from the compressor over here on the driver's side of the engine, and they run up over, they split. One goes up here to the condenser, and that one goes back around to the accumulator. The issue is, whenever I need to do any work on this thing, particularly pulling the valve cover off, this does have roller rockers in it. I also have pulled the motor out a couple times. It actually needs to come out again for a completely unrelated reason. But every time I have to do that, because of the way they routed these lines, it's almost like it was a bit of an afterthought. They run over the top of the motor and around the intake, and they hoop up around this bracket here, and there's no way that I've found to be able to get the engine out or even get the valve cover off very well without bending these lines, taking them loose and moving them out of the way, and, or just completely taking them off, which requires, hooking up to the high side and the low side port, sucking it out, putting it back in, and it just is a pain. So I think what we're gonna do, what I would like to do, is take these lines off and make these lines again so that they go down under the engine and maybe like under the radiator. I need to get underneath and see what we have for space, but maybe like under the radiator and then come up and then, go into the condenser and then split off and go over here over to the accumulator. And that way it keeps it away from the motor. If I have to do anything on the motor, it's a lot less work dealing with the AC lines. Let me show you what I've got that I'm gonna, try and fab some different lines with. All right, now in the past, what I've done is I've done AC several different ways with motor swaps and stuff. And one of the ways to do it is just to make a complete new line, hose everything. And that's not a bad option. It works. There's actually places, I think some of the Napas can do it. I have a place here locally that can crimp the lines on, and you just let them know. You have to get the ends sometimes, order those online, and you can make full AC rubber hoses. There's also some products out there, like AN style products that use like a stainless braided, sometimes it's got kind of a Teflon liner on the inside to make hoses with. And that stuff works okay too. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of stainless hoses on something that you're going to be using more than like a race car. They're very abrasive. So if that line runs across anything, if it runs next to a rubber hose, that stainless is like a hacksaw blade, and it will just sit there and rub through, it'll cut through brackets if they're mounted too close. Rubber hoses stand no chance against that stuff. Wire harnesses, like if you don't have a stainless hose routed just perfectly right, use the vehicle a lot, it's got a lot of vibration, a lot of operation runtime, it'll just start cutting through stuff. Not a big fan unless you can keep it completely segregated. So what I got was this stuff, and I got this for two reasons. A, because I don't really want to have it rubber all the way, and B, because I don't want to use stainless. And actually one other reason, and that has more specifically to do with the build of this Jeep. But what this is I got this from McMaster Car, and it's just hollow aluminum tubing. You can kind of see it. So I hit the back of the Jeep. I think it's like 16th wall, and I got a 1/2 inch piece and a 5/8 ID piece. And I measured these lines, and that's how I determined what size to get. And what I'm going to try and do is make the line with this and then just like swedge it, push it inside of itself, and then TIG weld it up. And that way I can still use the factory rubber hoses, the crimps, but there's also a couple other things. Let me show you those on the engine here and show you why specifically I want to use this stuff. All right, we're back over here at the engine, and let's talk about a couple reasons specifically why I want to use that hard line instead of doing rubber hoses and just replacing it all. One of the main reasons, besides the stainless and the rubber and the problems we have with that, is we have all these sensors and ports that are connected to these lines. And specifically, we've got a low side, I believe, pressure sensor here on the return line. We have a high pressure sensor over there on the high pressure line, as well as this fill port on the high pressure line. If we did replace that with rubber lines or stainless, we would have to add in those sensors somewhere in the system, whether we put them, you know, we do two hoses with a connection in between with the sensor, or we did a block where the sensor can screw like right on the compressor, or, you know, we could even potentially, I mean, I have seen it before where people just eliminate the high side, the port for the high side. You don't really 100% need it. You can fill through the low side and sort of check your pressure through there. It's just not really like the best case scenario. I think it would be better if we went ahead and incorporated this stuff into our new line without losing all that stuff. We can still have the sensors and the high side port, and we can sort of balance the best of both worlds. So let's get started. We're gonna go ahead and start taking these lines off, and I'll show you what they look like when we get them out of the Jeep. Okay, I went ahead, I removed this high side line, just take the nut off, the stud, pull that guy out. Of course, you do have to pull the Freon out to do that. And then I went ahead and took, kind of see it down there, I took this nut off right there of the return line there. And then I'm gonna have to crawl underneath, I guess, to get the compressor line off. And I may have to cut these lines to get them out. I don't really want to have to pull all my accessories and stuff, fuel lines and whatnot. And we know we're going to be cutting these lines anyway to splice them together. So if I can come up with a good plan as to where exactly I want to cut them, probably like on some of these sharper bends maybe is where I'll cut them. If I can come up with a good plan of where to cut them, I'll probably just cut them so I can pull them out and save myself the time of having to remove all this other junk just to get the lines out. All right, as you can see, we went ahead, got the lines out, and I did go ahead and cut them. I cut both of them kind of right on a bend. That way I can get them out without having to pull a bunch of stuff off. I think the first thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is lop off the ends and kind of put those in place, and then see what direction we need to go with the lines. And then I can start to figure out where I want to put the sensors, the port, and I also want to put the rubber hose in as well, because the engine does need to have some rubber between it and the frame, because the lines go from the engine to the frame. So there does need to be rubber somewhere in the equation so that there's, you know, the ability for the line to flex. If we just ran the hard line straight from the engine to the frame without solid mounts, which we don't have in here, we've got rubber mounts on the engine. Without solid engine mounts, it would just flex these lines and eventually they would break, and maybe not even in that much time. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut some ends off and sort of start getting it laid out and figure out where things are gonna go and how we're gonna route the lines. And I'll get back with you just as soon as I get something figured out. All right, we got our drill with our swaging tool. That's just a cheap tool. I got it on Amazon. It was like less than $10, but it's basically kind of like a step bit, but it's rounded on all sides. And what I've done is just take a little bit of grease and put it on there. It's just a little bit of like wheel bearing grease. Put that on there and then stick it in the pipe, kind of push down and go forward. And you can see it just bends that pipe right out like it's nothing, and creates that sort of stepped area. And then before I weld it, I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna clean all this up with a stainless steel brush, brush the inside, brush the outside, everything. But you get the idea. Step it out like that, and then you can grab your other pipe and look at that. It slides in there so nice. And then that gives you a nice spot to either solder it, or just, you know, with what I'm doing, just taking the TIG welder and just TIG welding around this nice. And you can index it, set it however you need to set it. You can draw your lines on the side, or use your scribe and scribe some lines on the side. And that gives you a really nice like step area to hold it together, put your weld in there, and that way we can put it all together and pressure test it. All right, I got it all finished. We're back here in the garage. I welded up all the lines, cut all the pieces where they needed to be cut, and I put them back in. Let me show you what I came up with. Okay, on the top of the Jeep, I cut the low pressure return line apart, and I kind of came out of the compressor and did like a little bit of a 45 S bend, came up into this rubber hose here, and then it runs up along the firewall and kind of does like a little bit of a 90 down into the accumulator. I think that will work pretty good. It's not perfect. I didn't really want to go over top and by the firewall, but it works out pretty good. The low pressure sensor ended up right here. Had a couple welds. There's one down there. There's one there that kind of puts it together. There's one at the end of the line, and then there's also one down where the line comes down and meets into the compressor fitting. I think it worked out pretty good. It'll work for what we're trying to do. And then down here, you can kind of see there is the high pressure line, and it's coming in from under the fan shroud, coming around. There's a weld there, and I think there's 2 welds underneath. We did a 180 out of the compressor, went down under the fan shroud and came back up around. And that turned out pretty good. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take, and I've got this hose. It's kind of a piece off one of those old like charge cans. It's just cut off. I put an air chuck on the end of it. And then what I'm gonna do is put about 50 pounds of air pressure in here, and then we will spray some soapy water on the joints just to check them and make sure that, you know, we don't have any leaks coming out of the joints anywhere. So let me get it charged up with some pressure, and then we'll see if we can find any leaks. All right, we got the system charged up to about 75 pounds, and I've been over here spraying the lines with some soap, and I haven't found any leaks yet. I think we're good, and I think that pretty much takes care of what we can do here in the garage. I'm going to take this thing up to the shop, you know, sometime in the next couple weeks, and I'll pull a vacuum on the system and check for leaks that way. You know, basically pull it all the way down, let it sit for a couple hours, make sure that it doesn't come back up. And if that's the case, I think we're gonna go ahead and put a charge in this thing, and hopefully we can check this one off our list of projects. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. If you like stuff like this, let me know. I've got a bunch more projects I need to do to the LJ. I've also got the TJ project going on. We started doing dyno videos the other day. I got a little bit left to finish on that. And also the CJ2, we got videos coming on that as well. Some videos on the drivetrain and also the engine. So yeah, if you like this kind of stuff, just go ahead, like, subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.